If heartbreak had a sound, it would be the echo of my ex's laughter in someone else's apartment directly across the street from mine. I wasn't crying over her, of course not. I was crying because my microwave burnt my popcorn 3 nights in a row. At least that's what I told myself. I was 27, single again, and freshly unemployed, which meant I had all the time in the world to wallow in self-pity and red wine. My apartment in suburban Oregon felt like an emotional vacuum, too quiet, too still, and too full of my own thoughts. Until she moved in next door. Her name was Claire. 42. Divorced. Painter. And as far as I could tell from our first encounter, she smelled like rain and rosemary. She appeared one late afternoon while I was wrestling with my garbage bags in the hallway. My hair was a mess, my t-shirt stained with coffee, and she in contrast looked like she had stepped out of a movie I'd never be cast in. "Need a hand?" she asked, her voice low, calm, with a touch of humor. "No, I'm good," I lied, right before the bag tore open and released a confetti of coffee grounds and shame all over the floor. She laughed, not mockingly, but with warmth that softened the sharp edges of my embarrassment. I remember that moment too clearly, how her laugh felt like sunlight after weeks of rain. I should have known then that this woman, this stranger with kind eyes, was about to turn my carefully built emotional walls into sand. Over the next few weeks I saw her often, sometimes through her window as she painted under the soft glow of a desk lamp, sometimes on the shared porch sipping coffee in her loose sweaters, her hair tucked behind one ear. And sometimes she'd catch me staring and smile, as if she didn't mind at all. Claire was different from anyone I'd ever met. She wasn't loud or flashy. She didn't try to fill the silence. She let it breathe, made it comfortable. And maybe that's what drew me in. I'd spent so long running from my own silence that someone who could sit in it felt like magic. One evening, I brought over a bottle of cheap wine, an excuse, honestly, to hear her voice again. "I figured we should properly welcome you to the neighborhood," I said. She tilted her head, her lips curving. "You are the neighborhood, aren't you?" I shrugged. "Population. One disaster." She laughed, and that sound, God, that sound was becoming addictive. We drank, we talked. About art, about heartbreak, about how she once lived in New York, before it stopped feeling like home. I told her about my ex, about how love for me always seemed to start with fireworks and end with ashes. She listened. Really listened. Not the way people wait for their turn to speak, but the way someone studies a painting, trying to understand what hides beneath the color. By the time I left her place, it was past midnight. The air outside was cold, and my heart, for the first time in months, felt warm. Weeks passed, and what began as casual chats became long nights on her porch talking about everything and nothing, our knees brushing under the dim porch light. There was something dangerous in the way we looked at each other, sometimes like we both knew a line was there, but neither wanted to name it. Then one night it rained. The power went out across the block, and I knocked on her door, flashlight in hand, pretending I was just checking if she was okay. She opened the door in an oversized shirt, barefoot, her hair slightly damp. "Power outage check-in?" she teased. "Exactly," I said, though my heart was racing for entirely different reasons. We lit candles and sat on her couch. The world outside turned to a gray blur of rain and thunder. She showed me her sketches, quiet portraits, delicate lines that somehow carried entire lives in them. One of the drawings stopped me cold. It was me. "Well," she said softly, seeing my reaction, "you have a face that asks to be painted." I laughed nervously. "That's one way to say I'm nosy." She smiled, eyes glinting in the candlelight. "No. It means you look like you're always halfway between leaving and staying." The room fell quiet. The rain outside filled the silence. I wanted to say something, anything, but she looked at me then, really looked, and I couldn't. Because in her eyes, I saw the thing I'd been running from all along. The possibility of love that didn't care about rules or timing or the world's labels. I kissed her first. Or maybe she kissed me. I honestly don't remember who moved first. All I remember is the warmth, the taste of red wine and courage, the sound of rain hitting the window, her hand on my jaw, gentle but sure. The shock of realizing that everything I thought I knew about love, its boundaries, its definitions, had just shattered quietly in a small Oregon living room. When we finally pulled apart, she whispered, "This shouldn't feel this right." But it did. It felt like breathing for the first time. The days that followed blurred between fear and euphoria. We didn't call it anything. We didn't have to. Every stolen glance, every brush of fingers, every morning coffee shared on her porch was its own language. Still, there was a tension beneath it, the knowledge that love like ours came with questions we weren't ready to answer. One afternoon I found her in the backyard, painting a sunset that looked suspiciously like the one we'd shared last week. I stood behind her, quietly watching the way her hands moved, confident, graceful, alive. "You make it look so easy," I said. She turned, smiling faintly. "It's not easy. It's honest." There it was again, that simple truth she carried in everything she did. Honesty. The kind that scared me. "Do you ever worry?" I asked. "About what people might think?" She looked at me for a long time before answering. "I've spent too much of my life worrying about everyone else's idea of love. I don't want to do that anymore." Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes didn't. I wanted to be brave like her. To stop overthinking, stop running, stop pretending that this whatever this was didn't already mean more than I could say. So I took her hand, right there in the sunlight, and whispered, "Then don't." But bravery is a fragile thing. And reality has a way of testing it. A week later I ran into one of my coworkers, former coworkers at the local coffee shop. She saw Claire walk in behind me, her hand brushing my back in that familiar way, and her eyebrows shot up. "Is that your mom?" she asked with a laugh. It wasn't cruel, just careless. But it hit like a slap. I laughed it off, pretended it didn't matter. But later in Claire's kitchen I couldn't shake it off. The words spilled out, insecurities, fears, all the invisible rules I'd absorbed without realizing. "What if people talk?" I asked. "What if they don't understand?" Claire set down her mug, her face soft but serious. "People will always talk, Emma. Let them. You and we get to decide what love looks like." Her calm should have comforted me. Instead, it scared me because she was ready and I wasn't sure I was. That night, when she reached for my hand, I hesitated. And that tiny hesitation broke something in her eyes. For the next few days things changed. We still saw each other, still shared small moments, but there was a quiet distance now, like fog between us. She smiled less. I laughed less. And I hated myself for it. One morning I knocked on her door. No answer. Her blinds were drawn, her porch empty. She was gone for 3 days. When she finally returned, she looked exhausted, but her smile was kind. Too kind. "I went to see my sister," she said. "Needed some air." I nodded, but my chest ached. Because I knew she wasn't running from life, she was giving me space to figure out if I'd stay. I didn't sleep that night. Every moment I'd shared with her replayed in my head, her laugh, her voice, the way she looked at me like I was something precious. I realized that fear had stolen enough from me already, and if I didn't fight for this, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. So just before dawn I walked to her door. When she opened it, still in her robe, hair messy and eyes half asleep, I didn't give her time to speak. I just whispered, "I'm sorry. I was scared. But I don't want to run anymore." She stared at me for a moment, then smiled, slow, warm, and a little broken. "Then stay," she said. And I did. The next morning the world felt different. Not brighter, not louder, just realer. Like I'd been living in grayscale, and suddenly someone had turned the saturation back up. Claire and I spent that morning in her kitchen barefoot, making pancakes that turned out slightly burnt but perfect anyway. She hummed quietly some old jazz tune I didn't recognize, while I watched her move, soft, deliberate, like every action had meaning. It wasn't about passion, not exactly. It was about presence. The kind that wraps around you like sunlight and refuses to let you go. After breakfast, she reached over and brushed flour off my cheek, her thumb lingering a second too long. That small, ordinary gesture sent 1,000 sparks through me. I smiled, trying to play it cool, but she caught it. She always did. "What?" I asked. "Nothing," she said, her voice low. "You just look happy. It suits you." I didn't say it, but it was her. She suited me. The weeks that followed were quiet, tender, and terrifying. We didn't label what we had, we just lived it. Mornings filled with coffee and laughter. Evenings with soft music, lazy conversations, and the kind of silence that didn't need filling. But there were cracks, too small, invisible ones that grew with each passing day. It started with my mother. She called one afternoon, her voice sharp as ever. "You never visit anymore, Emma. What's keeping you so busy out there?" I hesitated. I've been spending time with someone. Oh, a pause. A man, I hope? My throat tightened. I could have lied, I almost did, but Claire's voice echoed in my head. You get to decide what love looks like. It's a woman, I said quietly. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then came the sigh, heavy and familiar. Emma, sweetheart. I just don't want you to make your life harder than it already is. It wasn't anger. It was worse, pity. After I hung up, I sat on my porch staring at the fading light. Claire appeared a few minutes later, carrying a mug of tea. Rough call? She asked gently. I nodded, forcing a smile. You could say that. She didn't push. She just sat next to me, close enough that our shoulders touched. That was the thing about Claire, she didn't try to fix my pain. She made space for it. Do you ever wish things were simpler? I asked. She took a long breath before answering. Sometimes. But simple doesn't always mean right. By November, the first snow came, soft, silent, and somehow melancholic. The town transformed overnight, and so did we. We began spending more time indoors, wrapped in blankets, watching old black and white movies. There was something achingly romantic about it, like we were hiding from the world, building one of our own. But love, even the purest kind, can't live in hiding forever. One evening while we were walking downtown, hand in hand, someone called out my name. It was Jason, my ex. He looked me up and down, his expression caught between surprise and smugness. Didn't think I'd see you again, Em. Guess you moved on pretty fast. His gaze shifted to Claire, and something ugly flickered in his eyes. Wow, didn't expect this to be your type. I opened my mouth, but before I could say a word, Claire stepped forward, calm but firm. Watch your tone, she said. Jason scoffed. Relax, lady. Just saying, bit old for her, aren't you? The words hit like cold water. I wanted to yell, to defend her, but the shock froze me. Claire took my hand, gave it a squeeze, and led me away without another word. We didn't talk the entire drive home. When we finally reached her house, she went straight to the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water, and stared out the window. I could feel the tension, sharp, electric, filling the space between us. I'm sorry, I said finally. For what? Her voice was soft but distant. For not saying anything. She turned to me then, eyes tired. You don't have to defend me, Emma. But I need to know you're not ashamed of me. I stepped closer, heart pounding. I'm not. God, I'm not. I froze. He caught me off guard. I know. She sighed, rubbing her temples. But love like this, it doesn't survive silence. You'll have to be braver than that. We both will. Her words cut deep, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind outside. Every fear I'd buried came crawling back: judgment, gossip, rejection. But beneath all that, one thought was louder. I loved her. Maybe that should have been enough. The next morning I made a decision. I walked over to her porch with 2 cups of coffee and a heart pounding out of rhythm. She was already outside, wrapped in her robe, painting the morning sky. I was thinking, I began, that maybe we could go somewhere this weekend. Get out of town. Just us. She looked up, surprised, then smiled slowly. Are you sure? Yes, I said. Completely. We drove 3 hours to the coast that Saturday. The ocean stretched endlessly before us, gray and wild, the wind tangling our hair. We rented a small cottage with creaky floors and a fireplace that refused to stay lit. It was perfect. That night after dinner we sat by the fire, wrapped in a shared blanket. She leaned her head against my shoulder, her breath warm against my skin. I used to come here with my ex-husband, she murmured. Feels strange being back. I hesitated. Is it hard for you? She shook her head. No. It feels like rewriting the story. I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Then let's write a better one. We kissed again, not the desperate, rain-soaked kind this time, but something gentler. Promise. Her hands traced my back slowly, memorizing me. It felt like the world had gone quiet, like the only sound left was our hearts trying to catch up with what we already knew. The next morning I woke to find her painting on the porch, the ocean glinting in the distance. She looked at me over her shoulder, smiling softly. I was afraid to love again, she said. But you make it feel possible. I walked up behind her, wrapped my arms around her waist and whispered, "Then don't be afraid anymore." We spent the rest of the weekend in a haze of warmth and laughter. It wasn't about passion alone, it was about belonging. About finding someone who made even silence feel like music. But when we got back home, reality waited for us like a storm on the horizon. The gossip started small. Whispers in the hallway, curious stares at the grocery store. I pretended not to notice, but Claire did. She always noticed. One afternoon, as we were leaving the art supply store, an older man, a neighbor, gave her a look that made my stomach turn. A mixture of judgment and disgust. Later that night I asked her, "Does it bother you? What they think?" She smiled sadly. "I've been judged before, Emma. For my choices, my age, my divorce. But this us is the one thing I refuse to be ashamed of." Her conviction was beautiful. And terrifying. Because I wasn't sure I was that brave yet. A few days later, I got a call from a local gallery. They'd seen Claire's work and wanted to feature her in a winter exhibit. She was ecstatic, nervous in that adorable way she tried to hide. I offered to help her set up, and she agreed, though I could see the worry in her eyes. On the day of the opening, she looked stunning, a simple black dress, silver earrings that caught the light. I stood beside her, heart swelling with pride. Her paintings hung across the walls like pieces of her soul, tender, raw, and painfully beautiful. One of them stopped me cold. It was us. Sitting on her porch, hands intertwined, the world melting into soft tones of gold and gray. "Too much?" she asked, reading my face. "No," I whispered. "It's perfect." But not everyone agreed. A man nearby muttered something under his breath, a crude remark about women wasting their beauty. I felt anger rise in me, sharp and sudden. Claire touched my arm before I could say anything. "Let it go," she whispered. "He's not worth it." But I couldn't. Not anymore. I turned to the man, voice steady but fierce. "Love doesn't need your approval. And beauty doesn't need to fit your idea of it." He blinked, startled, and turned away. Claire's eyes met mine, glistening. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," I said. "You were right. I'm done being quiet." She smiled then, the kind of smile that makes the world tilt a little. "That's my girl." That night, after the gallery closed, we walked through the empty streets, our hands brushing in the cold air. The town was asleep, the streetlights flickering like tired fireflies. She stopped suddenly, turning to face me. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked. "All the time," I said. "And what do you see?" I thought for a moment. "You. Maybe a house with a messy garden. A dog that steals our shoes. Mornings that smell like coffee and paint." She laughed, soft and low. "Sounds perfect." "It will be," I said. "Because we'll make it." For the first time in months, I believed it, really believed it. The world might not understand us. People might talk. But for once I didn't care. Because love, the real kind, doesn't ask for permission. Just is. Winter came slowly that year, layering the small town in silence. The trees outside my window turned to skeletal shadows, and the air smelled like snow and longing. Claire's art show had been a quiet success, her portraits sold. Her name whispered with admiration in the local scene. But success didn't erase the weight we carried. People still talked. Not loudly, but enough for the echoes to find us. Some days I could shrug it off. Others it felt like walking through glass. One morning we were having breakfast pancakes again, this time without the burnt edges, when Claire said quietly, "I've been offered a residency in Santa Fe. 6 months. They want me to paint, to teach." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "Santa Fe? That's amazing." Her eyes searched mine. "It is. But it's far." The silence stretched between us like a fault line. 6 months. It might as well have been forever. "Are you going to go?" I asked, my voice smaller than I meant it to be. "I don't know," she said. "I don't want to leave what we've built here. What we have." The words felt heavy, fragile, like glass I didn't dare touch. I wanted to be supportive, but fear curled inside me. What if she left and realized she didn't need me anymore? What if I was just a chapter she'd outgrow? I forced a smile. "You should go. You deserve it." She reached for my hand. "Deserving something doesn't mean I want it more than you." And yet, a week later, I found her packing her brushes into neat wooden cases, her studio suddenly too quiet. The decision had been made not because she wanted to leave, but because she couldn't afford to stop growing. Artists, she said, needed to move to breathe new air. I told her I understood. But the truth was I didn't. The day she left, the sky was the color of unspoken words. We stood by her car, the air cold enough to bite. She cupped my face in her hands and whispered, 6 months. That's all. Then I'll come back and we'll see where we are. I nodded, but tears blurred everything. Just promise me you'll come back. She smiled faintly. You already know the answer. And then she was gone, her car shrinking into a dot on the road, until it disappeared completely. The wind felt sharper after that. The world quieter. My apartment became a museum of her mug in the sink, her paint-stained sweater hanging on my chair, the faint scent of rosemary that refused to fade. For the first time in years, I understood what missing someone really meant. The first month was unbearable. The second, survivable. By the third, I started painting. It was something Claire had encouraged, but I'd always dismissed. I can't draw a straight line, I used to joke. But one day, I found myself sitting at her easel, brush trembling in my hand, trying to capture the light falling through her empty window. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't even good, but it was honest. And somehow that felt enough. I sent her a photo of it that night. She replied hours later. It's beautiful. Keep painting. Keep living. We spoke often, calls, texts, the occasional video chat. She showed me her studio, the desert light spilling across her canvases. She looked radiant, freer somehow. And though I was proud, a part of me ached watching her world grow without me in it. One night halfway through her stay, I asked, "Do you ever regret leaving?" She hesitated, then said, "Only when I think about you." That was enough to carry me through the next few months. Spring crept back into Oregon, quiet and tentative. The cherry trees bloomed early, painting the streets in pink. I'd stopped counting days, stopped checking my phone every hour. I wasn't waiting anymore, I was living again. Still, on the morning of her return, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Her car pulled up just as the first rain began to fall. When she stepped out, I swear the world paused for a heartbeat. She looked exactly the same and completely different, sun-kissed, lighter, her eyes filled with the kind of peace that only comes from finding yourself. I ran to her, laughing and crying at once. She caught me in her arms, and the rest of the world disappeared. "You're here," I whispered. "I'm home," she said. The next few days were a blur of rediscovery. We fell back into our rhythm, coffee in the mornings, porch talks in the evenings. But there was a subtle shift between us, something quieter, more grounded. We weren't holding on out of fear anymore. We were choosing each other freely. One night, as we watched the rain blur the city lights, I asked, "Did you ever think we'd make it here?" She smiled. "I didn't think we'd make it this far, to be honest." "Why?" "Because love this different. It demands more courage than most people are willing to give." I thought about all the times we'd almost fallen apart, the whispers, the judgment, the distance, and realized she was right. We had earned this peace inch by inch, day by day. "Then let's keep being brave," I said. "But courage doesn't mean there's no fear. Just means you love anyway." That summer, Claire's art was chosen for a national exhibit in New York. They wanted her for a full-time position, her dream, really. When she told me, she looked torn between joy and guilt. "You should go," I said automatically. She frowned. "You don't even want to talk about it first?" "I do. But I don't want you to hold back because of me." She studied me for a long moment. "And what about you, Emma? What do you want?" I opened my mouth and realized I didn't know. For so long, my world had revolved around her. But now, standing in front of the woman who'd taught me how to feel again, I realized it was time I learned how to live too. I want to find out who I am when you're not standing next to me," I admitted. Her eyes softened. "That's exactly why I fell in love with you." We stood there in the quiet, hands clasped, both knowing what came next. The day she left for New York, it didn't feel like a goodbye. It felt like a beginning, a promise whispered into the wind. We kept in touch, but less this time. Not because we were drifting, but because we were both finally whole. We were living, growing, creating separately, but never apart. I took up art classes. I started selling small prints at the local market. People began recognizing me as that girl who paints with heart. I smiled every time someone said it, because I knew where that heart came from. A year later, Claire came back not for good, just for a visit. We met at the same porch where it all began, the same wooden boards beneath our feet, the same smell of rain and rosemary in the air. She looked at me and said, "You've changed." "So have you," I said. She laughed softly. "Do you ever regret any of it?" "Not a second." The sun was setting behind her, painting her hair gold. I reached out, took her hand and said, "We don't need to fit anyone's idea of love. We just need to live ours." She smiled, eyes glistening. "You always were my bravest decision." And then she kissed me, slow, certain, timeless. The kind of kiss that doesn't ask for forever, but still promises it anyway. Now, years later, when I tell our story, the girl and her older neighbor, the rain, the porch, the paintings, I don't start with the heartbreak. I start with the laughter. The way she made me believe that love could be both ordinary and miraculous at once. People still ask sometimes if we're still together. The answer is complicated and simple all at once. Yes, in the ways that matter. She lives in New York now, running her studio. I stay here, painting sunsets in silence. We visit when we can. We write when we can't. And every morning when I open the curtains, I still imagine her light spilling through them. Because she taught me something no one else ever could. That love isn't about permanence. It's about presence. About showing up again and again, even when life pulls you in different directions. And every time I lift a brush, I hear her voice in my head, gentle and sure. "Be honest, Emma. Paint what you feel." So I do. And every stroke, every shade, every color, it's her. Always her. The woman who opened my heart. The neighbor who became my home. The love that refused to fade. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.